Shalom Parshat Noach. Noach, alone among the human race, survives the flood. What was his secret? What did he do to merit being preserved when everybody else was so guilty they had to be destroyed? Well, the Torah says he was a tzadik, a righteous person in his generations. But there are some rabbis who diminish the level of his righteousness and say he really wasn't as great a tzaddik as he could have been had he lived at the time of Abraham, for example. He would have been a big nobody, that only in comparison to his generation, which was so corrupt, was he considered a righteous person. There are those who go further, though, and they say that had there been a commission of inquiry to explore who was guilty for corrupting those generations to the point where they had to be destroyed, that commission of inquiry might have pointed their finger at Noach himself. Wow, we're not just diminishing his righteousness now, we're giving him blame for what happened to his entire generation, so how come he gets saved? And indeed, the Ketav Sofer, a great commentator, says that it wasn't self-evident that he was going to be saved. When God says at the end of the previous Parsha of Bereshit that he says, I regret that I have created man, he's including Noach. And only after that saying does the Torah tell us that Noach did find favor in God's eyes. So God regretted creating everybody, including Noach, but when it came to destroying humanity, he was going to preserve Noach. So Noach was sort of in the gray area over here. Why so? And we say on the Rosh Hashanah liturgy, V'gam et Noach be'ahava zacharta. Also Noah you remembered to save him. Why does it say the word V'gam, also? Because it's not self-evident, because Noach's righteousness was with an asterisk, if you will. But how can we go from there to saying that he was responsible? What did he do wrong? So a couple of ideas come from the rabbis that he did something terrible. What did he do? He invented the plow. Wait, that's terrible? That sounds like a nice thing. Noach seems to be this very nice, pleasant guy. He's very quiet. He doesn't even speak until the end of the Parsha. And he does something to help people, because how did they have to plant their fields until that time? On their hands and knees with their fingers. They were out there literally slaving away. And this was the result of the curse of the earth that God had given at the time of Adam, when he ate from the tree of knowledge. God says to Adam, as a result of this, the earth is cursed, you shall eat by the sweat of your brow. And so that's what people were doing all the time. So Noach says, people are suffering. It's not good. I'd like to do something for humanity. He invents the plow. Why is that a bad thing? Well, say these interpretations, it's a bad thing because it caused or enabled humanity to become very corrupt. How so? Two ways. One explanation is simply that it gave them free time. Until then, 24/7 or whatever the time frame was, they were always busy. When the evil inclination would come and say, hey, let's go do some sins, let's worship some idols, let's attack some people, let's be immoral. Sorry, talk to me in about 6 months, and 6 months later they're busy with the next agricultural season. Noach comes along, makes a plow, finish my work in just a few hours, and now I got a few days off, let's party. That's one way where Noach indirectly enabled the evil inclination to corrupt the generation. Another interpretation, the Ketav Sofer himself says, is because the plow caused them to stop fearing the Lord. How so? Well, God had cursed the land, and the people felt that they had to work as hard as they could, otherwise they would die of starvation. So they felt their dependence upon God, and that God's curse was eternal. But once Noach invented the plow, they began to think, maybe we can defeat this curse. Maybe we can have our cake and eat it too, as it were. Maybe we can bring in our harvests without the sweat of the brow that Adam was cursed with. The plow made it easy. Technology made it easy. And then human beings began to think of themselves as being capable of perhaps defeating, if one could say such a thing, God. And that heresy opened the way for the Yetzer Hara to say, not only now do you have the ideological basis to sin and follow your lusts, but you have the free time to do it as well. So if you combine both of them, we can see that Noah is indeed responsible. So why was he saved? What was his secret? So there are two types of righteous people we can see. One is a sur meira. He stays away from the bad. And the other one is an asay tov. He does the good. Noah was certainly among the first category. One of my teachers in high school used to always encourage the students to not go to a secular university. Best to go to a yeshiva. If not a yeshiva, if you want to go to university, then go to YU, Yeshiva University, or Touro College, a place which is a Torah institution. And if worst comes to worst, and one needs to go to a secular university, choose one where there is a very strong religious group of kids who spent a year in Israel, so that you will not be alone. Because if you're alone in a university setting, the temptation will be very overwhelming. One or two individual Shabbos observant religious Jewish kids in a place where they're all having these incredible parties on Friday night, week after week, and inviting them to come, and nobody's going to know and nobody's going to say anything, it's really hard to maintain one's righteousness under that kind of a temptation. But what did Noah do? Noah lived at a time when there was absolutely no one else who was behaving morally. He was the only one. How did he do it? What was his secret? And why, therefore, did he deserve to be saved? Well, the Torah tells us. I'll give two answers. The Torah tells us, Et ha'elukim hithalech Noach. Noach walked together with God. In other words, Noach was not alone in his generation. He wasn't the only righteous one. He was the only righteous human. But for Noach, God was a real companion. He was present in his life at every moment, and he was constantly thinking, what will God think of what I am doing now? How will he judge me? He would feel that sense that King David expressed so beautifully, Gam ki elech begeitz halmavet, even though I walk through the shadow of deepest darkness, Lo yirara ki atay madi, I will not fear any evil because you, God, are with me. So that's the first explanation, and that gave Noach the ability to withstand the temptations of all of human foibles, because he was walking together with God. One explanation. Another explanation, Rav Moshe Feinstein is also bothered by a lot of these questions, and he says the following. He says, the Torah says that Noah found favor in God's eyes. What does it mean he found favor in God's eyes? It means that everything Noah did for God was done in a favorable, beautiful fashion. It wasn't like Cain, who brought a sacrifice from quality B, but rather it was like Abel, who gave the best to God, because his relationship to God was such that he only wanted to beautify God. And when we think about that, that explains a couple of puzzling things about the whole story. First of all, according to the sages, well, there's an argument in the sages. Some say that the flood did not happen in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel. Well, if that's the case, then why didn't God say to Noah, instead of building an ark, which would take him 120 years, talk about fast, just say to him, take a little trip for a couple of weeks, go to the land of Israel, there won't be a flood there. So that answer may not be so strong. That question may not be so strong, because even if the flood wasn't there, it doesn't mean that it didn't happen there at all. If you've been to Jerusalem and you see what's on top of Cinema City, you might agree that this is proof that the flood was there, because there's a replica of Noah's Ark. Or is it a replica? At any rate, that explanation doesn't necessarily work, but the question can be asked. God tells Noah, he says, and listen to the sequence of things. He says, the end of the human race has come before me, because the land is corrupt. Go build an ark. Did God tell Noah why he's building an ark? Oh yes, he told him because the human race is going to end, but did he tell him why an ark? He didn't mention a word about a flood. We have no idea that it's going to be a flood. It could be a plague, it could be a meteorite, it could be anything. Only at the end does God tell Noah, oh, there's going to be a flood. So why so? Because God is giving Noah the ability to redeem himself on a couple of levels. And he's saying to him, you build this magnificent ark. And God tells him exactly the dimensions and the architectural style, how many floors, how to get light. That's unique. Why all the details? Just say to him, build a big ark, because you're going to have a lot of animals coming in. God gives him great detail, because this is what Noah does. He does things with chen, with grace, with beauty. And when he serves God, he makes sure that this is worthy of the relationship with God. That is why when we fulfill mitzvot, we try to do it in the most beautiful fashion, the most beautiful lulav and etrog, the most beautiful tefillin. We make Shabbos beautiful by sitting around the table and singing zmirot. We make prayer beautiful not by running through it, but rather reciting it with kavanah, with intent, and with melody and beauty. We have a synagogue that is not looking like a storage room, but rather a beautiful structure. That is the merit, says Rav Moshe Feinstein, that Noach had to be saved, that he did everything that related to God was done with beauty, and that might explain why the ark was so important. But even so, all of these things are explaining how Noah was a tzaddik on the level of sur meira, of avoid doing bad. But we're still missing the aseh tov, the do well. And this brings me to a third element. You see, a lot of the times in the Torah we have a story of a character who is at the beginning challenged, at the beginning doesn't pass the test, but over the course of their life they then learn the lesson and then they change. I think of Joseph, who at his beginning was a bit vain or narcissistic, it would seem to be, and then at the end he becomes so selfless that it is remarkable. And that Yaakov, who is called the man of truth, starts off his career by saying to his father, I am Esav, your son. So sometimes a tzaddik has to specifically earn that character trait. And so Noach starts off as a sur meira, as a person who walks with God, so it's something within his wheelhouse that he can be resisting the temptations of the generation. But when does he become an aseh tov, somebody who desires to do good? Perhaps this whole experience of the ark will do that for him. You see, Noah, when he builds the ark, it's taking him 120 years. And people would come and say, what are you doing, Noah? What are you building over there? And he'd say, I'm building an ark because God is going to destroy the world. Right? I'm reminded of when Jonah, the prophet, says to the people of Nineveh, 40 more days and Nineveh is going to be destroyed. And all of the people repent. So maybe this was what God wanted for Noah to do, to start him thinking about the rest of humanity. He's walking with God, but what about humanity? And Noah gets it to a point, but doesn't really nail it until later, until after the flood. According to the Zohar, after the flood, Noah came out of the ark and he saw the destruction of the world and the destruction of humanity, and he was so upset. He says, God, why did you do this to the world? Why did you bring such destruction? And according to the Zohar, God answers him and says, why didn't you say that before? Why didn't you pray for humanity? Moshe is going to come along. He's going to pray for Israel when they sin. Why didn't you pray for humanity? And I believe that this is the reason why Noach became so depressed that he turned to alcohol. After the flood, as we know, he got drunk because he now was confronting the fact that he had been a great tzaddik of sur meira, but his aseh tov wasn't where it needed to be. And so he learned that lesson. And so after the flood, if he would have had it to do over again, it is guaranteed he would have done it differently. At least I think so. And so therefore we learn from Noach that the power, the secret of surviving, the secret of being a spiritual giant in a generation and in a time and in a place where there is so much opposition to it is number one. Is being a sur meira, is walking with God. Is number two is making sure that your relationship with God is one of beauty and of honor and respect. And number three is realizing that God loves humanity and therefore to intercede with God and to plead with God and do one's best to elevate all of the humanity that one is surrounded by. Sheyeh Shavua Tov.